You are at war with yourself and likely don't realize it. Your thoughts, beliefs, habits, and actions often sabotage you. Are they helping you overcome adversity or setting you up for failure? To win this battle, you must connect with your inner warrior. We all have a warrior within us, one that strengthens our resolve and helps us to rise to meet life's challenges. If you're just surviving rather than thriving, then it's time to embrace the warrior archetype, live the warrior ethos, and ascend. If you are a veteran, first responder, or someone looking to take charge of your life, find your tribe, and then be the hero of your own story, this podcast is for you. Join Mike Kinney and Matt Hastings, two retired U.S. Army officers who served in U.S. Army Special Operations and Army Aviation units, as they share with you optimal performance practices they learned in their time with the Military and Warriors Ascent, a 501c3 nonprofit that helps veterans and warriors with PTS.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Warriors Ascent podcast with your hosts, Mike and Matt. So this episode, tending the body, move and eat. So we say movement and exercise. So that's what we'll talk about for this episode. So let me ask, for those that might be having trouble relaxing, right, or even focusing, and I'm sure we've all been there, like I just can't focus. It's hard. My mind is racing. So between that or even just nervous energy, I know for me, a lot of times I'm like on edge or, agitated or whatever it might be. I'd ask you, hey, same deal. If you could take a pill for that, Ritalin, Prozac, and, I'm not saying that, hey, if you're feeling that way, you should go immediately and get those prescribed to you. But I'll say it this way. If there were an activity wherein you could derive the benefits of Ritalin and Prozac in terms of focus and anti-anxiety and relaxation, would you avail yourself of it? I'd hazard a guess that most people are going to go, sign me up, man, especially if it's cost effective. In this case,
all about
free.
A magic pill.
Right? No, exactly. So exercise, cardio. So studies have shown that a good bout of cardio is like a little bit of Ritalin and a little bit of Prozac. So I know myself, I can speak to it. If I come off a good run, whether it's, hey, a couple miles or, a longer run, or even I'll say a CrossFit, high intensity training, workout, elevated heart rate, I feel pretty good. And just like the saying, right, a little bit of Ritalin, a little bit of Prozac, I feel, number one, very focused, because you've got that blood pumping, all of that. But at the same time, almost paradoxically, you're pumped, you're ready to go, but I really feel centered and relaxed.
Right.
A lot of that might just be, exhaustion,
Could be.
but at the same time, I do, I feel really centered. And also I'm a big believer in that. So again, the scientists can say that, the exercise physiologists can say that, the psychologists can say it, and they have, and they do. But I will say myself, I've experienced that plenty of time. Yeah. So what about you? Same thing?
Yeah, it's the same thing. And I have to relearn this all the time. I'll be in a great, several years of exercising great, and then you fall off. And when you get back on, you say, geez, why do I ever stop? Because it feels so much better. And then whatever circumstances, next thing you know, you've let it go. And so it's always hard to start again. But for a fact, I know that you just feel so much better, so much more attuned.
So what you said totally resonates with me. Is I'm pretty, I'm pretty regimented, I'm in pretty good shape, but there are times when it's like, hey, everybody sloughs off. Especially those longer runs, you're like, I don't feel like doing them. You hit it right on the head. I come off of that and I might be kind of quasi-suffering while I'm doing it, like, oh my God. But on the back end, I just feel so great. Right. I'm like, oh my God.
And every time you're glad you did it.
That's exactly it,
right.
And so, it's like eating, right? It's like eating, but kind of the opposite. You're like, oh, this jelly donut, so good going down. And then on the back end, you're like, oh my God, I feel like I could go to sleep because that insulin spike and you
Right.
just feel horrible. So while, it satisfied and, satiated you, but the downstream effects of that are like, why did I do that to myself?
sure it can be.
Exercise like the opposite. While you're doing it, you're kind of like, this is tough. I'm exerting myself. But the benefits on the back end, both immediate and even long-term, are profound.
Right.
So it's really an investment. So the other thing we'll talk about too is nutrition, along those lines. So same deal, you can eat a bunch of crap and immediately satisfy yourself. And it's easy to do, right? It's like that whole slight edge thing that we talked about. These practices, exercising, eating right, or the antithesis, right? The converse, not exercising, not eating right. They're easy to do and easy not to do. And, you plot that on an XY, axis, right? Along that X axis. And you can see that over time, the benefits are exponential. They might be incremental up front over days, months, but in the long term, you're going to derive, an exponential benefit. But by the same token, those little things you think that aren't hurting you day to day, over time, the months, the years, you're like, oh my Lord, how did I become obese, hypertensive, diabetic? How did this happen to me? Well, it didn't happen overnight.
Right.
Just like getting in shape doesn't happen overnight. But it's that insidious onset that'll creep up on you if you're not careful.
I like that insidious onset, because it really does. Next thing you know, it's been 6 months and you haven't gone to the gym or you haven't walked, or it's like, it could have been winter caused it because it's so miserable out or whatever it is, But incremental, insidious. I like it.
Insidious onset. I mean, it sneaks up on you, and next thing you know, you're like, oh my God, how did it come to this? And that is hard.
Or you've even mentioned to me that you run into somebody that says, no, I know all this and I do all this, and you look at them and you say, I can see that you don't.
Right.
And
people think,
but maybe they did, and we're very regimented about it. It's 4 months ago or whatever. It's a tough one. You got to stay on.
That's exactly it. No, so we'll talk. Eating and moving. So moving, we'll say, as a proxy for exercise. So on the low end, hey, get out and move, walk, do something. And I know, for some people that might be listening, they may have injuries. I know I've had, multiple reconstructive ankle surgeries, and I wasn't moving a whole lot, when that happened, but you've got to do something. You do the bike, or you do, upper body, whatever it might be, an older person, same thing. So move, do something. And if you can exercise rigorously, hey, do that as well. Eating, obviously we'll speak to that, but I bring up the flywheel as we did in the last episode, but for those that maybe missed that one, here's what we mean by that. So sleep, eat, move, and then breathing, good breathing, diaphragmatic, deep breathing, cross-cutting. It affects all of them. But you can see where sleep begets good eating habits, begets movement. They're all related to one another. So I like, as Matt pointed out, I like the cyclical nature of the flywheel, and that they're all related to one another. They all impact one another. But then also, much like a flywheel, if you want to speak to us about that. What is it about the flywheel?
Well, it just takes its time to get going, and rather than going from 0 to 6,000 RPM instantaneously, it takes its time to work its way up to that speed. And it's similar to how you could approach, a workout regime as like, that's what I'm doing. I hadn't done it for a while because I get, I got a bad back and I got bad neck, and I just thought, I just can't do it anymore. And then I finally said, well, I got to do it. And so now I'm doing really easy stuff just to build up those areas that I'm complaining about, core muscles and back and hamstrings and
that's right, and
all these different things to help a foundation. Like we talked about last time, I have to have this foundation so then I can, move more. But as I'm doing this, the joints are getting greased up again.
That's exactly
which is making me drink more water.
Mm-hmm.
And now I was out in the yard doing some planting stuff that if I would have bent over as much as I would, that would have probably put me in bed for 2 weeks. And now it's like, hey, man, I think I'm actually starting to fix some of the things that were an issue just on flywheel type exercise. like slowly. Like I mean, it's so embarrassing how little I lift right now, but it's all about the weight or about the form and the function of the lift, you know. So
That's right. Well, we'll talk about that later in the episode. You don't lift weights, you load movements. CrossFit friend of mine taught me that, and I always liked it. When you're fixating on lifting the weights, you're kind of missing it. You want to do the proper functional movement first. That's where people get themselves in trouble. They lift improperly, they hurt themselves. They've got muscle imbalances, a lot of asymmetries. I know I do. I'm paying for that now.
Yeah.
Where you've got some sports specificity, where you've got some muscles are developed more than others, whether wrestling, boxing. And now later in life, you're paying for that because now you've got orthopedic injuries and issues and things of that nature.
I mean, actually, speaking of paying for it, I got a trainer and told them my exact issues, and that person studied what they could do to help me. And I said, I'm very nervous about starting any kind of regime just because I keep hurting myself.
Right.
And so I keep doing the things that I knew how to do when I was in my 30s.
That's right. Yeah.
And that's
You're
my
thinking,
problem.
hey, I should be able to do this.
Yeah, I just don't know how to do it anymore.
And you hurt yourself.
Right. And so now this young guy is really, I'm like, this is the weirdest exercising I've ever done, but it's really improved me. So, I mean, there's ways to do it, and it's flywheel big time, slow.
That's exactly it. Building that momentum, all of those related to it, so don't discount any of them. But, we talked about this before. It's that incrementalism. When you go, again, using the metaphorical flywheel, if you're starting at 0 and you think you're going to get to 6,000 RPMs, that's when the flywheel comes off the axle and, and there it is. You've got to move slowly and build that momentum. So to your point, shoring up, your core and all the support structure. And again, you've had surgeries. I've had multiple surgeries, shoulder, ankle, you name it. And when you're coming back from that, you cannot start off where you left off. You've got to kind of build everything back up again. And for some people, and I'd hazard a guess, a lot of our military types, our veterans, and first responders, hey, tough guys and gals, they're like, well, I don't want to start over. I want to start where I left off. And it's like, well, be careful, especially when you get older, because you've got that support structure. You've got to rebuild that base. It's a cautionary tale.
I learned a thing called rhabdomyolysis.
Rhabdo, where you work out so hard you freaking wreck yourself.
Yeah, it's not good.
Yeah, no, but some of the other things too, that we talked about, obviously the incrementalism and just kind of slowly but surely, not doing too much too soon, realizing your limitations, that, hey, you can't always do the things that you were doing as a younger person. And that's okay, make peace with that. But the important thing is to do something. I think we'll talk about FITT principles shortly, but the key is you've got to do something. You can't just say, all right, I'm going to sit back and slough off. I mean, there's always something that you can do. With all that said, let's look at our nutrition, right? So why nutrition is so important, right? You can't outwork a bad diet. So we were talking about this before. Hey, my mantra when I was a younger guy, special forces guy, infantry, ranger, all that, it was all things burn in the fire of extreme activity. And, I still kind of watched what I ate, but I wasn't too worried about it. And now as an older fella, I'm like, oh my God, I'm doing all, the right things. And I'm still kind of not as lean as I wanted to be. And that's getting older. I get it. But you can't outrun a bad diet, or you can't outwork a bad diet. The other thing is.
Not with my knees.
Right. No, exactly. No, so, the other things too is beyond just body composition, aesthetic, and physical performance, it fuels your mind. So there's a cognitive aspect to it as well. So I know if I'm eating something with a lot of simple carbohydrates, sugary, I get this real cloudy, like, oh my God, it's that insulin spike. But here's the other thing, as it says here, you have more neurotransmitters in your gut than you do your head. So again, beyond physical performance, even beyond just, cognitive, if you're not feeling right, if you're feeling a little out of sorts, it may very well stem from what it is that you're eating.
Absolutely.
So some of those, the neurotransmitters, dopamine, norepinephrine, serotonin, These are your happiness, hormones and all of that. So suffice it to say, what you put into your body has more impact than just gaining weight and body composition and, I want to look good. It has everything to do with cognitive performance, physical performance, and even well-being.
It goes back to garbage in, garbage out.
That's exactly it.
Same with your thought patterns. If you're feeding your brain negative thoughts, negative actions, the same with food.
That's exactly it. So, for our purposes, we're not going to go into all the details. Obviously, this isn't a podcast specifically dedicated to diet. We're just going to cover the wave tops. But hey, what constitutes a good diet? So I'm not going to explicate every item on this list, but really what you're looking at is lean meats. You need protein. I know there might be some vegans out there. Hey, that's cool. However you get your protein, but you need that for body repair. That's irrefutable. Whether that's lean meats or beans and tofu or whatever the heck, right?
Yeah.
I like my protein, but that's cool. Vegetables, mostly vegetables. So there's commonality with a lot of the diets, the Mediterranean diet, the paleo diet, the keto diet, this, that. Keto is, anti-carbs, and I'm not disparaging any one of them, but I'll say the threads of continuity are people should be eating more vegetables than they probably are. You need to be getting the right kinds of protein for repair, whether that's through vegetables or lean meats. Fruit is good. It's not the enemy, but sucrose, fructose, not sucrose. Sucrose is table sugar. Fructose, still sugar. So if all you're eating is tons and tons of fruit, that's still, a big sugar load, but fruit is still good. Nuts, nuts and seeds are good for, omega-6, I want to say.
Right.
Omega-3 is your oily fish, which are good too, and people probably don't eat enough of. But
I have to
stay away
supplement that.
What's that now?
I actually supplement fish oil and vitamin D.
Supplementation's important too. No, absolutely. Stay away from the refined foods. Sugar is horrible for you. We all love to indulge in it, but be mindful of that. Don't drink your calories, soda and juices. Be mindful of that, because if you're trying to maintain a certain caloric level, you're going to violate that by drinking,
especially juices,
by drinking your calories. Exactly. Yeah. Everyone thinks, this is healthy, but it's such as a caloric load, right? Yeah. So nutrient dense foods, as my wrestling coach when I was in high school always used to caution us against eating empty calories. Those are ice cream sundaes, right? Empty calories, no nutritional value. So, enjoy that sparingly. But if you're not deriving, that benefit, right, nutritionally, then try to, not to do that too much.
Right.
Obviously still stay well hydrated. Food allergies, you'd mentioned that before.
Right.
It's worth getting tested. If you consistently feel that, I'm always bloated, I'm always, I'm eating right, I'm eating the right things by all intents and purposes, or for all intents and purposes, but I still don't feel quite right. You may have a gluten intolerance, lactose intolerance. So I'll throw again, in terms of diets, there's that Whole30 diet, and I'll just throw that out there. Not that I'm going to advocate for anyone, but the intent there being, if you read about that, is what they'll do is they'll wean you off foods that have been known to be inflammatory. Milk and gluten, this, that, and the other thing. And they kind of baseline you over 30 days, hence the name Whole30. And then they'll reintroduce those things sparingly. So they'll, in essence, they'll isolate variables.
Oh, wow.
And then reintroduce one individual variable once they and then guess what? If you drink milk after that or have dairy products and then you have gastrointestinal distress, well, you probably have lactose intolerance. Or you can just get tested. But hey, bottom line,
I think
you
that
should
would
probably be mindful of food allergies, because they're
totally
subverting.
And I think a lot of people have no idea that they may have a gluten issue. I think a lot of people do; they just don't know it. Or lactose. I used to be an ice cream eater like every night. Now it's no such a thing.
Ice cream,
I loved it.
No,
but I used to ride, several hundred miles a week. I tried really hard to exercise and make it worthwhile, but it still was killing me. So sometimes you just got to bail.
Yep. No, I think it's worth doing, because as we've said, you dial in your nutrition, your diet. It is so much more than just body composition and aesthetic. It's got everything to do with physical performance, well-being, all of it. So now exercise, right? We'll cover some of that. So one of the principles I want to talk about ever so briefly, right, is the FITT principles. So you've got all sorts of just like with diets, you've got all sorts of different workouts out there, kettlebells, this, that, and the other thing, and that's great. Whatever gets you moving is fantastic. But in terms of principles, I like the FITT principle, right? Frequency, intensity, time, and type, right? And I would say from an exercise perspective, if you've got nothing else from this podcast, for this episode, take this away. So frequency, I would say, is king, right? Chief among them. And frequency is how many times are you exercising a week, right? Intensity obviously has to do with how intense, right? In terms of perceived exertion and output. And you can measure that by heart rate and a variety of other metrics. But really, it's how intense is your exercise? Is it low, easy, aerobic? Or is it your anaerobic, alactic, where you're just, almost in vapor lock, at the end of doing like some circuit training? That's some high intensity stuff. Time, duration, hey, how long and at what intensity, right? So is it a long run? Is it quick but intense? And then obviously type, cardio, strength, resistance. You've got a variety of exercise modalities that you can avail yourself of. But for our purposes, I'd like to say chief among them is frequency. And we both chuckle at the example that, one of our buddies who's an alum, Dave, who's exercise physiology guy, very, very knowledgeable. He says you can exercise, at a high level once a month and crush yourself. And what is that doing for you? So you had one great workout. That's great. That doesn't constitute, fitness. Whereas if somebody does the basics a couple times a week or every day or goes for a walk every day, that's going to have so much more benefit. You're going to derive so much more benefit from that.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts there?
Well, I just thought it was funny how you guys said something like, worked out once this month and like, this just isn't working for me. I got no results, and look at you with a straight face.
Right. Yeah. Exercise doesn't work. I worked out once or twice and I'm still the same. It's just like, yeah, okay, bro. That's not the way your body works. Just like in the previous episode, we talked about, meditating and breathing and all of that. Do that stuff every day. It's that slight edge piece where you don't have to kill yourself. You don't have to meditate for an hour. Have it be 10 minutes. You don't have to completely, you don't have to subsist on tofu and bean sprouts every day, but just cut out some of those things that are known to be bad for you. You don't have to do an extreme CrossFit workout or train for a marathon. You can go for a walk. You can do some yoga. You can do something for 30 minutes a day, and you're going to derive a significant amount of benefit from that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you can breathe a little harder, all that stuff. It's good stuff. The weather's getting perfect out right now here in the spring in Kansas. It's a great time to be outside.
That's exactly it. Well, that's another component to it is if you can get outside, and there's science behind that as well. Being in the sun, in terms of your sleep cycle. Totally. Getting that exposure, I think that's like an Andrew Huberman thing. But there's something to that. There's also studies that show, you can be on the treadmill in a gym and that's great. Better to be outside. Yeah. For a variety of reasons, so to your point, good.
This sounds to me like it sounds like that thing we were talking about called self-care, all of this stuff we put together.
That's right. That's right.
It's just regular stuff, eating, sleeping, all those things, and we can wrap that into self-care by just doing the right steps. It's pretty cool, man.
That's it. It's part of your self-care routine. So along those lines, I'm going to quote John Rady from Spark, right, where he ties exercise and fitness to overall mental well-being. What I like about this, right, in terms of varying intensity, right, he talks about the ancient rhythms of activity ingrained in our DNA translate roughly to the varied intensity of walking, jogging, running, and sprinting. In broad strokes, when I think of the best advice is to follow our ancestors' routine, walk every day, run a couple times a week, and then go for the kill every now and then by sprinting. So in essence, what he's saying is it's hardwired into our DNA to approach those training modalities, and that's how we function the best. So beyond just, I'll say, exercise physiology and some of this crazy stuff, and the next slide will go a little bit into that. you know, and you're like, well, geez, why? I'm not an exercise physiologist, and I'm periodization. I'm not training for the Olympics. Hey, that's cool. But John Rady's saying that, hey, exercising at these varying intensities is how your body is wired for optimal performance. So again, what does that look like? And this is a little technical, and I take this from periodization training for sports from Tudor Bomba. But what does that look like? You know, what's walking, the sprint, and the kill that John Rady's talking about? So your anaerobic threshold, 2 to 7 minutes, your exertion, 65 to 80% of your max heart rate. Max heart rate, for those that don't know, it is 220 minus your age, right? So a guy like me, it's about 167 beats per minute. So if I want to train at the anaerobic threshold, then I need to be like at the 140s and maintain that for 2 to 7 minutes. And I just did like a CrossFit type workout today. Yeah, and that kind of sucks. You know, you feel it. You're like, you're in vapor lock.
Notice it.
Aerobic threshold is a good long run. All right, hey, that's at a decent pace, but you're not going into threshold, right? So that's 60% of your max heart rate. Some people like the Maffetone method, right? Maffetone, a guy named Phil Maffetone, Dr. Maffetone, will say the calculation is 180 minus your age, and you shouldn't exceed that. And that's if you want to maintain your aerobic threshold.
Right.
And then aerobic compensation, that's an easy walk, right? So as we mentioned, for those that they may have injuries, or for older people, if you're in that aerobic compensation zone, that's still good.
Yeah.
That's still good. That's fine. But just trying to make it real, you know, you can speak concepts. I mean,